Welcome to the Gateway Radio Program, a weekly radio series discussing the issues of human potential and technologies. The Gateway Radio Program is brought to you by the Monroe Institute, a research and educational organization dedicated to the exploration of conscious awareness. Here now is your host of the Gateway Radio Program, Mark Serta.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the premiere edition of the Gateway Radio Program. I'm Mark Serta. Over the course of time, we're going to bring to light a host of interesting interviews with various persons involved in the field of consciousness research and its applications. We have a myriad of people in the world right now who are considered pioneers in the subject, and it's very interesting to me that as we move into the 21st century, that more and more of these people are beginning to gain a lot of credibility in the arena of what's been considered hardcore science. Having said that, I want you to consider how difficult it is to quantify something as enigmatic as consciousness. For many years now, science has considered consciousness as being a byproduct of brain activity. Ergo, when someone's asleep or unconscious, one is not consciously engaged in any activity. But this idea has been presented with a lot of interesting paradoxes when you consider the fact that many people have had experiences which they remember consciously when they are allegedly in an unconscious or semi-conscious state. For instance, there are many people who claim to have remembrances of situations which take place in an operating room, like a discussion that a doctor will be having with a nurse, when these people are supposed to be unconscious under anesthesia. Taking that into consideration, one of the most interesting stories is the founder of the Monroe Institute, Robert Monroe. For those of you who don't know this story, Mr. Monroe was a self-made millionaire in the broadcast industry in the middle part of this century, who quite spontaneously began having out-of-body experiences. He was a very practical man and not given toward any mystical background, so he found himself involved in a more scientific approach to try and understand and control this very unique situation. His experiences were chronicled in a book called Journeys Out of the Body, which is written in a kind of diary form. The results of his research became what is known as the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute is a very interesting place that prides itself on non-dogmatic approaches to the understanding of human consciousness. The predominant research that goes on there includes the measuring of brainwave data as it applies to various states of consciousness. The results of this research is then reverse engineered in the form of specialized audio patterns that actually have an effect on brainwaves and therefore alter states of consciousness. Once your state of consciousness is altered, any number of amazing experiences can happen to the person who's listening to these sounds. The sound is called Hemi-Sync, and with me today is Skip Atwater, who is the Institute's research director, and Dr. Darlene Miller, who is a psychologist and the director of programs. I want to thank you both for being here. Skip, let me direct my first question to you. Explain to me, what is Hemi-Sync and how does it work?
Hemi-Sync is a word, an expression, a trademarked term. Hemi-Sync is used to describe a process, an audio guidance process. And this audio guidance process includes a method of relaxation, of breathing, of visualization, and an induction of a binaural sound pulse to alter a brainwave state.
Well, what's the difference between Hemi-Sync and the binaural beat component specifically?
The binaural beat is an element of Hemi-Sync. A binaural beat is an audio response that the brain has to two slightly different inputs, one in each ear, therefore the term binaural. And the sound we hear inside our head is a beating. So it's binaural, two ears, beat.
So if I understand you correctly, Hemi-Sync is the overall relaxation process.
And a trademarked name.
Right, and the binaural beat, which stimulates the brainwave response, is just a component of the overall Hemi-Sync process. That's very interesting. Bob Monroe talked extensively about something called focus levels, which are utilized as part of the Hemi-Sync process as well. Darlene, what exactly are focus levels?
Focus levels are used to differentiate between different states of awareness or different states of consciousness, and they simply become labels that make it easier for us to communicate with each other about what we're experiencing. The numbers themselves, the 10, 12, 15, 21, for instance, don't mean anything. They're just arbitrarily chosen to represent those states. And actually Bob chose them because he didn't want them to have relationship to other systems or other methodologies and approaches to the study of consciousness. And they're guideposts, they're markers, they are sort of a way that in a shorthand fashion people can describe what they have in common in the various states of awareness. And so if I'm deeply relaxed or my body feels asleep and my mind is awake and alert, it's just easy for me to say I'm in focus 10.
Well, from a psychological standpoint, what is occurring in somebody when they achieve these focus levels or states of consciousness?
Well, everyone experiences them somewhat differently, although there are some commonalities. But basically, people are becoming very relaxed, and in the process of becoming relaxed, they are able to be open to exploring and open to maybe different kinds of experiences from what they've had before. It seems that there's also a real focus of their attention or their awareness in a very, we say in a sort of laser-like way. It becomes very easy in those states to focus completely on whatever the intent is for going into an exercise or a tape.
Well, how is that possible to still have a focused attention when the body is asleep? I mean, how does one separate one's consciousness from the body?
Well, often that experience of the body being asleep, even to the extent where someone may hear herself snore, is the first recognition that someone has that perhaps their consciousness does operate independently from the physical body. That's often the first recognition that gives people a glimmer of that we are indeed more than our physical bodies. We seem to be able to have that kind of awareness when physiologically it would indicate that we would not be consciously aware because it would look like, say, on an EEG pattern that we might be deeply asleep.
Well, by now the public is certainly aware of things like all the buzzwords that are going on regarding certain brainwave states as being particularly beneficial for certain tasks. Brainwave states, for those of you who don't know, are labeled as delta, theta, alpha, and beta. Skip, how do these brainwave states correlate to these particular focus levels we're discussing here?
In this day and age, it's a little bit too simplistic to label things the alpha state, the theta state, the delta state. Those were common terms in the 1960s, but now it is more appropriate to think of different balances of brain waves in different areas of the brain happening simultaneously. So you might have on the top part of your head a theta thing going on, while in the back of your head you have some alpha going on, and the front of your head have some delta going on. So it's a very complex question as to what's going on in terms of brain waves while this is happening. But with those general guidelines and warnings, the focus 10 state, or the body asleep, mind awake state, has some of the characteristics that have been attributed to sleep, i.e. the body is asleep. There are delta waves being produced in the head across the top of the head in what we refer to as electrodes C3, C4, which are classically measured type sleep things. When we move into a focus 12 state, there is a little bit of alpha added to that in other areas of the brain. And we go on beyond that, we add areas of theta in focus 15, and then areas of beta in focus 21, building in a progressive, ever more complex layer cake of many different brain waves in different areas of the brain.
It sounds like a movement where you begin by putting someone in a relaxed or sleep state and then help them to become more consciously aware as they go on through the progression.
Yes. And focus 21 being a very awake state of mind and very asleep state of the body.
So it's quite a paradox, these focus levels, then.
Yes, very much so.
Well, doesn't that sort of imply that all the talk about from science in the past about this state or that state being particularly beneficial for a given purpose really just make that sort of thing a myth?
It's actually an oversimplification that has grown into a myth. Labeling the alpha state, that's what I want the alpha state, or the theta state, that's where I want to be, I want the theta state. But the brain, and using it as an interface for the greater what we are, or the spirit or the soul or the mind working through the brain is tremendously complex. And at no time is it ever spend 10 minutes or even 10 continuous seconds in something we might call the alpha state or the theta state. There's a constant dynamic motion to all these different brainwaves. The complexities of the binaural beat signals we use in the Hemi-Sync process are just phenomenal. We use many different theta, delta, alpha, beta tones mixed together in a very complex situation because it mimics or matches the complexity of the brain function itself. So do we give an alpha binaural beat to create the alpha state? No, that's much too simplistic of the way the brain works and the way the binaural beat mixes work. Mm-hmm. We go to great pains to ensure that the particular mix of frequencies provide a rich milieu of stimulus that the brain can respond to.
Well, if I may connect what you're saying here to what Darlene was saying before about focus levels not being mystical locations as much as they are beneficial states of awareness, the complexity of the Hemi-Sync process emulates the brain waves involved in these very complex states of awareness. Is this accurate, Dar, what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I think especially given Skip's explanation, because we are speaking about a complexity that goes beyond, I think, even beginning glimmerings of understanding that we have now. Yeah. And I'm personally more comfortable talking about transcendence, for instance, because the truth is, from my experience, it seems to matter less. I have seen people have what I would call a transcendent experience in Focus 10, in Focus 12, in Focus 15, in Focus 21, in Focus 27. There's something happening that certainly goes way beyond.
Define the transcendent experience for me, if you will.
It would be one in which the person generally feels a movement beyond and into something greater than how they usually define themselves, and moving into a state that often they'll describe in more universal concepts or spiritual kinds of concepts. They will talk about, for instance, melding with the light, becoming part of the light, or feeling a sense of unconditional love or universal love. It's moving outside of ourselves in the way that we typically operate.
Okay, I want you to hold that thought right there. When we come back from this commercial break, I want to talk more about the transcendent state, including the granddaddy of them all, the out-of-body state. I'm here with Skip Atwater and Darlene Miller. You're tuned to the Gateway Radio program. We'll be right back.
The science of the mind, consciousness. Throughout human history, mankind has asked the basic questions of our existence. Who are we and where are we going? The Monroe Institute offers a unique series of programs designed to help you explore your fullest potential and unlock the secrets of conscious awareness. Utilizing its patented Hemi-Sync technology, these week-long programs present you the opportunity to explore your own inner world and beyond. For information on the Monroe Institute, its products and services, access our website, monroeinstitute.org, or call 1-800-541-2488.
Hi, this is Frank DeMarco, Chairman of Hampton Roads Publishing Company. Since 1989, Hampton Roads has been publishing titles on a variety of cutting-edge topics. Visionary fiction uplifts the spirit and promotes metaphysical understanding. Alternative medicine promotes gentler, more effective tools for wellness. And metaphysics gives insights into out-of-body experiences, past lives, prophecy, and Toltec shamanism. Hampton Roads gives you the books that you really want but won't find anywhere else. Visit our website, www.hrpub.com. That's www.hrpub.com. Or call 1-800-766-8009 for a free catalog. 1-800-766-8009. Hampton Roads Publishing Company. Books for the evolving human spirit.
And we are back with Skip Atwater and Darlene Miller of the Monroe Institute, two people who are at the forefront of some very exciting research. Skip, we were talking about states of consciousness, specifically the transcendent state, how they apply to these things called focus levels. It sounds to me like what we're really dealing with here are some experiences that aren't really very quantifiable at all. Is that accurate?
People have been trying to define and agree with and come up with the ideal descriptors of these states of consciousness for a number of years, and the Tibetans have 251 different transcendent states of consciousness. And, it's kind of, we think of transcendence as being one thing or one sense of feeling. So it depends on whose list you read, what book you read. Two general piles of information might be something called dissociative states and transcendent states. The transcendent state is a suspension of the personal ego and the melding with a oneness, and usually they're ineffable, meaning the people can't quite describe what it is. It's like a little bit beyond words.
Okay, well, I promised our listeners before we went to the break that we would talk about the out-of-body state that Bob Monroe made famous. Darlene, what exactly is an out-of-body state, and does the Monroe Institute actually teach people how to leave their bodies?
Well, the classic out-of-body is what people read about in Bob's books. He was the person who made that very interesting to people. People who've been having similar kinds of experiences read his books, and they get very excited about coming here.
It's exciting, right?
Usually they're calling because if they've had the experiences, they've been spontaneous, or they perhaps feel out of control, and they'd like to come and see if there's something they can learn here that helps them get more willful control over that process, so it's not so random, and they can use it in certain ways. Other people come very much, and they've never had it, but they've read the books, and they get excited about the possibility of having one, and so they think that in coming here they can learn to do that. And a classic out-of-body is one in which he describes there's generally, at least for some people, a fairly strong period of vibration before a perceived separation from the physical body. And with the classic looking back and seeing your body perhaps lying in the bed, or really almost visually knowing that separation has taken place. I think what we've learned over the years, and actually what Bob came to and used to talk about to groups toward in the last couple of years, was a more subtle kind of process that he talked about in terms of phasing one's attention from this here-now sort of reality and just gradually becoming more and more out of phase from the physical.
Well, can you give me a clearer picture of that?
If I'm sitting here talking with you and there's a part of me that's wondering, did I turn off the coffee pot this morning when I left the house? I'm a little bit out of phase. If I'm daydreaming, I'm perhaps more out of phase. If I'm in focus 10, perhaps more, and so forth. So it is a matter of a shift of awareness, or how you're focusing your attention.
Okay, that's pretty clear to me. Let me shift my phase just a little bit, and let's talk about the research that goes into understanding and creating these states of awareness. Skip, what type of research actually goes into Hemi-Sync technology?
There are three things that are associated with research when you think of the Monroe Institute or Hemi-Sync and research. There are kind of three things that happen all together, and they are separate. One of those research things is research going on here, and that research involves the process of demonstrating brainwave effects to the binaural beat component of the Hemi-Sync process. One other form of research not taking place here in the Institute is the research done by members of our professional division, in which they use Hemi-Sync in clinical settings and provide us with information about how they applied their research. A dentist might use it to help reduce anxiety or reduce pain, or an educator might use it to help students perform better in an educational setting, or a therapist might use Hemi-Sync to help reduce anxiety, or as an induction technique during a therapy procedure. A third form of research is being conducted by various outside organizations that are not affiliated in any way with the Monroe Institute, but are interested in testing binaural beats and or the total Hemi-Sync process. So sometimes specific tapes or whole tape series are tested by outside organizations, hospitals, universities, that are not in any way affiliated with the Institute, but still are seeking a maximum output, a maximum outcome, and look into many different technologies, Hemi-Sync being one of them.
So there's actually quite a bit of research going on in and outside of the Monroe Institute. You were talking before about technologies, other technologies. I imagine that subliminal or hypnotherapy would fall into that type of realm. Darlene, would you consider Hemi-Sync as being either subliminal or hypnotic?
I'll address the subliminal thing first. I don't consider them subliminal. There are portions of certain tapes, for instance, H+ tapes and certain sleep tapes, other tapes where an instruction that had been given previously at a sort of normal voice level and can be easily heard is repeated and reinforced when the person perhaps is in a sleep state, and so the volume is very, very low. However, if you just crank it up, you can hear, and you can hear what it's being said. So it's not underneath the level of being able to hear. There are certainly components of hypnosis, I think, in any time on the tape where you're given a verbal instruction or a suggestion to do something or to visualize, or sometimes people use the tapes to give suggestions to themselves in what we would call an auto-hypnotic kind of suggestion. Certainly that's one part of what goes into the whole process of Hemi-Sync.
I think that that's probably, to elucidate a little further on Darlene's answer, I think if we look at the intent in both of those things, the word subliminal has carried with it a pejorative or negative intent sometimes, in that I'm going to sneak something into you without you knowing about it. On the other hand, a very pristine, clear, academic definition of the word subliminal means below the conscious threshold. So in the H+ sleep portion, where the affirmations are given at very low volume, academically speaking, they are below the conscious threshold. But there's no intent to do something secretly or without you knowing it, because they're simple repetitions of previously given affirmations. So we don't think that they're subliminal in the pejorative sense. They're just kind of really low volume so they don't wake you up. On the hypnosis side, classical hypnosis gives over your will or your intent to the hypnotherapist. And the hypnotherapist might commonly say, you will do what I tell you to do and you will follow my suggestions. And yet all the Monroe tapes, although they deal with similar states of consciousness, are all self-empowering.
So the intention is what really makes the difference there in your mind. Let's talk about the concept of subliminal technology. You're not being able to hear it. Do you feel like if the message that's on the tape can't be heard, does it have an effect on the person in the way that they experience it or remember it if they can't experience it consciously?
Yes, of course, but that doesn't help you feel better because you don't remember it.
Okay.
So the question is do I get the information? Does it do me any good? And what is the difference between our subconscious or unconscious world and our conscious world? When you wake up in the morning and you don't remember your dreams, and you might swear, I didn't dream, but we can hook you up to all sorts of machines and show evidence that you were dreaming. So the fact that it isn't part of your conscious world is not necessarily testimony that it doesn't exist. And since much of our life runs on automatic, runs on unconscious programming, it's okay for it to remain unconscious. That doesn't help, though, the way you feel about it when you say, well, I just don't know, I just didn't remember. So, how you feel about what the situation is. Many people that are experienced in this find that there's some sort of a integration of this later. As time passes, it kind of cooks inside your head and kind of The term for this is cognitive dissonance. It kind of figures itself out, and it's in your own head, comparing with your own belief systems and how this might fit in before you have a conscious realization or conscious recognition of something that has been developed. Yes, it gets in, and yes, you hear it, and yes, the exercise is there. It doesn't necessarily feel good not to have it in your consciousness.
It's not an insta-fix that way. It seems to be more of a long-term thing.
If there are things that bump into your belief systems that need to be worked out at some other level, then it can take a while. But if it matches your expectations and your belief systems, then it bubbles to the top instantly and becomes part of your experience.
Well, that brings up an interesting question about our belief systems and how they affect us. Darlene, from your perspective, how much of a part do belief systems play in someone achieving results by, say, using Hemi-Sync tapes?
Well, our beliefs affect everything. There's no way of getting away from that. And I think we find here that the more limiting beliefs they have, perhaps the less forward progress they feel. I mean, they come into recognition that there are certain beliefs that are really keeping them, holding them back, or keeping them from exploring as freely and fully as they would like to. One of the things that Bob always talked with groups about is the power of fear to do that.
Yeah,
and
right.
His whole point, the whole point of the Gateway Voyage and our programs and the Gateway Experience home tapes is that as people work with these and are open to looking at their own fears and limitations, that allows, in doing that, allows them to move into what he would call knowns, away from just the belief, I believe something, or I have faith that it happens, or I heard someone else say this and it sounds credible, so maybe I'll believe that. But the power of these various ways of the programs and the tapes is that people can come into their own knowingness, not just a belief, but through their own direct experience, come to know something for themselves that is a wonder. That there's a confidence that gives them, and a serenity, and just a willingness then to continue to opening up, because they realize as they go through this process that the fear is usually of the unknown, and as the more we come into through our own experience, pieces that indicate, well, that wasn't so bad, I'm willing to try something more, I'm willing to open up more now and see. And then there becomes a sort of excitement, and the fear diminishes, and there's a curiosity and an adventure, and then they're off and flying.
So they experience a breakthrough of their fears of the unknown. It's kind of like a perspective shift going on there.
That's exactly it.
Well, how does Hemi-Sync enable somebody to actually do something as important as that?
Well, I think some people can perhaps attain the same thing through music, which transports them in some way, or which they particularly identify with. But the thing that it seems to me to be key about the Hemi-Sync process is the relaxation component.
Okay.
Because when we're relaxed, we are much, and in that, say, a state of focus 10 or focus 12,
Right.
we tend, C1 consciousness to be very defended, and that's part of the fear, and we're
Right.
keeping things at a distance from us, and we find that when people are working within focus 10 or focus 12, for instance, that they seem, because they're more relaxed, they're feeling safe, psychologically protected.
Mm-hmm.
They're more willing to let down those defenses.
That's interesting.
And in doing that, it seems to me there's a part of this that just in the willingness to look
Mm-hmm.
at things, something shifts, an energy
Right.
shifts. Whether it's addressed, whether it's fully confronted, that's helpful in the process. But just the willingness to look at these things makes something change, makes something happen within the person that then can be an impetus for further growth and development.
This shift has been known for years, and like Darlene said, it can take place in many different kinds of settings. It's called the autogenic shift, and is indicated by brain waves. It's indicated by receptivity to learning, and it is part of a thing that happens when people meditate, part of a thing that happens when people listen to classical music. It's part of what happens during hypnosis, and it certainly is part of what happens in the Hemi-Sync process, is this autogenic shift that takes place. I think that in your last question, I was reminded of something that always comes up with me, and that is there is a tendency to use language which empowers the tape, to say, this is a very powerful tape, or this tape really does it to you, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I have kind of my own personal language, which I try to watch very carefully, in that the experience really is within the person, and that the looking for things that are powerful outside of us, be they Hemi-Sync tapes or chocolate ice cream, is probably not appropriate. The toolkit concept, the training wheels concept of the Hemi-Sync process is an important aspect, but to always remember that it's the person that's powerful, not the chocolate ice cream or the Hemi-Sync tape. It's the person that's powerful. And therein lies the situation. If a person has the intent to listen to a Hemi-Sync tape to prove that nothing ever happens to him, then his intent will be fulfilled.
Right. Intention plays a large part in everything that we do. It's my intention to grab a bowl of chocolate ice cream during the break. Leave your radio on while you go get that ice cream. We'll be back after these messages.
Stargate, a top-secret government project created to study remote viewing, the ability to describe unknown objects, people, places, and things through psychic ability. For over 20 years, psychic spy Joseph McMoneagle worked to develop and use his remote viewing skills for national security purposes. In his classic book Mind Trek, he describes how remote viewing developed and tells how it really works. Now, in the new revised edition, he includes an entire chapter on the previously top-secret Stargate program. This is Frank DeMarco, chairman of Hampton Roads Publishing Company. Buy Mind Trek from your local bookstore or directly from us at 1-800-766-8009 and ask for our free catalog. Visit our website, www.hrpub.com. Hampton Roads Publishing Company, books for the evolving human spirit.
In the age of information, it's becoming increasingly more important to bring ourselves into a state of balance and integration. Hemi-Sync, a patented audio guidance system developed by the Monroe Institute, gently facilitates the optimal brainwave states for learning and relaxation so needed in today's fast-paced climate. Backed by over 30 years of research in the area of human consciousness, Hemi-Sync technology can provide the answer to all of your daily stress and help improve your overall performance levels. To find out why so many thousands of people rely upon this marvelous technology, access our website at monroeinstitute.org or call 1-800-541-2488. That address again, monroeinstitute.org or call 1-800-541-2488. Welcome back. My guests today are Darlene Miller and Skip Atwater of the Monroe Institute. Darlene, the Institute has some incredibly compelling success stories of people with some serious health problems who use Hemi-Sync tapes to promote healing or to ensure good health. The Positive Immunity program that TMI puts out is for this purpose. When you get a phone call from somebody out there dealing with a serious health problem, what kind of success do you tell them that they can expect from using a Hemi-Sync tape?
Well, I think what we know is that our bodies do have a somewhat miraculous ability to heal themselves.
Yeah.
I think we've seen that in the studies that have to do with spontaneous remission. We have many hundreds of reports of people who have really had miraculous kinds of results, and they attribute it to the Hemi-Sync process, to using the tapes. My own suggestion in handling these kinds of questions is to get away from the specific disorder that someone's talking about. Will this tape cure my cancer, or whatever the question is, and move into more general statements that we can support because we know of research in these areas, and we know of studies that have been done, which basically just generally suggest two broad areas. We know that there's a lot of research now that shows that stress has a very debilitating effect on the body.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Stress affects the immune system. Another thing that we know is a person's outlook or attitude also works to have an impact on a person's physical well-being. And so we can talk about stress, we can talk about positive outlooks, the need for positive outlooks and attitudes and hope, and talk about our tapes as providing an environment where people do become relaxed. We're very effective at reducing stress through initiating relaxation, deep relaxation. And that in combination, again, we talk a lot about intent, which is basically the intent in the person's attitude or outlook, can combine to really kick in whatever it is the body needs to do in terms of the spirit-body-mind connection to move toward a state of greater equilibrium or balance or well-being.
So it is a more holistic approach. Skip, what part does intention play in the healing process for these folks who are listening?
I think intent is a key element that you carry with you and that actually fulfills your purpose. Remember, the Hemi-Sync tools are simply a way in which to access a greater realm of consciousness that you have. So if you can carry that intent into a greater realm of consciousness, then you're bound to get results.
Yeah.
I think in terms of using our greater selves and accessing broader realms of consciousness in the tape situation, you should consider a wider dynamic in terms of human behavior as to the number of times I might want to use the Hemi-Sync process, be they 3 different tapes or just one tape, the number of times in a day that I might want to use that. When in the day should I be using that? And there's some interesting information about that that can be drawn from a wide range of knowledge on human behavior. It would seem that choosing a regular time to do this consciousness exploration would be beneficial.
You mean like a ceremony?
For ceremonial reasons as well as for biorhythm type reasons, and choosing an optimal time. Some people love a favorite time early in the morning. Maybe wake up early, set your alarm clock for 5 in the morning and get up then and do a tape. Or maybe you want to do one regularly in the afternoon at 2 o'clock every single afternoon. It would seem to establish a routine pattern, choosing whatever's comfortable for you, but sticking to a routine pattern would be very beneficial. In terms of looking for results from a tape, there's a lot of data in the affirmation world that says that you need to use an affirmation style for at least 6 weeks in order to ensure that you've given an ample opportunity to work. And on any particular tape, I always tell people to listen to the tape 3 times. And my own kind of personal feeling is that the first time you listen to it, it's strange, so you might have some kind of defensive barriers up. The second time you listen to it, you might fall asleep. So give yourself a 3rd time where you hit both of those extremes. Add that to the concept of doing your exercises at a regular time each day, and you have yourself your own regime and your own schedule.
Right. So there seem to be an awful lot of factors at work here with regards to the healing process. Let's talk about some of the things that might limit someone's success with Hemi-Sync therapy.
There are a number of individual differences that apply, and there are psychological profiles, personality profiles you can give people that have some sort of a predictive quality as to whether a particular type of therapy might work for them or not.
Right.
I think that when people ask about tapes, what Darlene said about the predictive nature of will this tape work for me is a very complex question. When you give someone an aspirin and this person says, will this aspirin fix my headache? in one sense, you can say, well, I can't predict how this will affect your headache because I don't have sufficient data. On the other hand, you can say, this seems to work for a lot of people. As a matter of fact, in the original drug testing, it seems to work for 62% of the people that take this. And that's about all you can say, because I don't know about you. I don't know the characteristics of your headache. I don't know whether you really like aspirin or whether it's going to upset your stomach or anything else. I can just say in this huge broad scope, it's really helped other people before. It's helped 60% of the people that have taken it, 40% of the people that doesn't help. Yeah. So when someone says, well, will this tape help me this way? Will this tape improve my performance this way? All we can offer is that it has done that for other people. But we can't say exactly that for you it will work, but it has done it for other people.
Well, tell me what measures that TMI uses to help make sure that these tapes are going to be effective for the public at large.
There is a broad scope of people that come here. We've done some testing as to the type of people that are attracted to the Institute and the tapes that work for them. As we push out into the broader community and more people who have never heard about TMI before, more people who have never heard about the Hemi-Sync process before come to us, we're going to be introduced to people who we have a lower predictive factor about. The only data that we have is people that show up here. Right. We know a little bit about the people that come to our programs here. Now, coincidentally, programs work pretty darn good for a lot of people. But in terms of the caller calling in on the phone and wanting to buy a tape to buy for home, we really don't know who that person is.
Okay, without getting too technical, so it goes way over my head, let's talk about some of the more technical reasons why Hemi-Sync works. Hemi-Sync is an acronym for hemispheric synchronization. This implies that the two halves of the hemispheres of the brain are working together as one. Why is that important? We have two hemispheres for a reason. What is benefited through hemispheric synchrony, for instance?
There has been for several decades a study of the functions of the different hemispheres of the brain. And this was popularized in a book called Drawing on the Right Side of Your Brain. And the concept here is that in one form of thinking, which has been called left brain thinking, that there are linear, time-centered, progressive, step-by-step processes of thinking, words and grammar rules, things like that would be left hemispheric styles. Whereas the right brain has been more identified with global types of thinking or pattern recognition. For example, I look at your face and say, oh, that's Mark Serto. The concept is that is a pattern recognition thing, not a linear thought, and occurs on the right side of the brain. So many types of thinking, like intuitive insights or understanding of total processes, seem to take place on the right hemisphere. Now, if we were to isolate ourselves and only have one kind of thinking or the other, we would be very limited in what we could do and shifting back and forth. Well, as we move through life, we need to have different areas of the brain specialized in focusing on certain things. However, there are times in life where we might want to use the whole brain together, working on a process together, so that we might bring to fore our total mental powers all at one time. And in that case, there are times at which the hemispheres become very synchronous. Throughout the years, these states have been recognized: meditative states, intuitive states, and even deep sleep. All are characterized by extremely synchronous brainwave patterns. That is, the right and the left hemisphere working together and communicating with one another in an ideal fashion.
Well, where does Hemi-Sync technology play a role in that scenario?
The process, the Hemi-Sync process, the relaxation, the breathing, the visualization, the binaural beats, all work together to generate these kinds of synchronous states. And the binaural beats uniquely work physiologically to support and maintain this synchronous state because of the way the audio patterns work inside the brain.
Well, it sounds really fascinating, and as much as I hate to take this break, I have to do this. When we come back, I want to talk more with Skip Atwater and Darlene Miller. We're going to talk a little more about the technical aspects of Hemi-Sync, how it affects the brain. You're tuned to the Gateway Radio program. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Fascinating,
compelling,
Profound,
engrossing,
stimulating,
intense,
inspiring,
visionary.
beyond the cutting edge.
Hampton Roads Publishing Company.
books for the evolving human spirit.
Visit us at our website, www.hrpub.com, or call 1-800-766-8009 for a free catalog. www.hrpub.com, 1-800-766-8009.
Hampton Roads Publishing Company. The sound of pure enjoyment. Melodies which stretch the imagination. Metamusic as richly diverse as your moods. Creating a sense of well-being. For home or office, Metamusic provides the perfect ambient background for a stress-free environment. Working in concert with the patented Hemi-Sync technology developed by the world-renowned Monroe Institute, Metamusic is the perfect complement to your relaxation. For a sample of our many Metamusic titles, access our website at monroeinstitute.org or call 1-800-541-2488.
And we are back with Skip Atwater and Darlene Miller of the Monroe Institute. Skip, before we went to the break, we were talking about whole brain synchronization and how that works. The Monroe Institute puts out a lot of literature about something called the frequency following response. Exactly what is a frequency following response, and how does that work?
The frequency following response is a very important measurement. It measures from the top of the head the electroencephalographic changes, electroencephalographic or EEG response to the binaural beats. And since we can actually measure a response to the binaural beats, we know that they are neurologically present. But that importance of knowing that doesn't mean that these changes that we're measuring when we measure the frequency following response are actually the changes in consciousness that we've talked about elsewhere.
Well, that raises two questions for me. First, how does the frequency following response affect consciousness, and where does consciousness show itself in the brain when you measure it?
That consciousness itself is a composite of a arousal level, like are you sleepy and drowsy, or are you up and active and playing basketball? Those are like changes in arousal levels, and a specific content. So you might be active and playing basketball, or active and playing tennis. So you can see the arousal level would be the same, but the content of the consciousness would be different.
Okay.
So when you think of your personal experience in life, or your consciousness per se, it's a balance between arousal and content. The mechanism of consciousness, the thing that regulates consciousness, our arousal level, and our content, is known as a part of the brain, a segment of the brain called the reticular activating system, and more recently known as the reticular thalamic activating system, or the extended reticular thalamic activating system, meaning that on the central part of the brainstem, the reticular activating system operating through the thalamus in the brain regulates the arousal level and content that the cortex processes for us. After all that brain stuff gets done, we experience consciousness. So knowing then that this is the way consciousness is regulated, the binaural beat must in fact be making changes to our consciousness through the reticular activating system.
Okay, I think I understand that. It makes my brain hurt just thinking about it, though. Darlene, the Institute holds week-long programs designed to teach people how to access and achieve these altered states and apply them in everyday living. Tell me what some of the benefits of coming to one of these programs are versus experimenting with, say, tapes at home.
I think one of the things is it's part of our environment in terms of the retreat nature of it is people have the experience of really being away from the distractions that it's difficult to get away from at home. And even if you have the intent of meditating or doing a tape, you might, in the back of your mind, think, well, the phone's going to ring any moment, or the children are coming home from school, or the cat just got on my chest, or whatever. And the environment here is much freer of those kinds of distractions than working with tapes at home. I think another thing that people talk about a lot that I've observed as well is the power that seems to be involved as the group energy. When you think about 24 people coming together, all in the same place, expressing the same intent, essentially, the power of that really is palpable. I mean, people sense the group energy and how it's working to enhance their own individual experiences. The discussion that people have following their tape experiences enhances, lends to individual learning. It can be very rich in kind of sharing that goes on.
Well, there are a few different programs that you offer. There's the Gateway, there's the Guidelines. What's the difference between them? They utilize the same focus levels, right?
For the most part, that's true. The Gateway, of course, is the introductory program when people learn about the components in the process that and get familiar with being able to identify and sustain focus 10, 12, 15, and 21. Learn about energy, their own energy, and how to work with that and all the many aspects of that and how it can be expressed and perceived. The graduate programs, Guidelines, has the focus of really helping people perhaps have a more internal focus. They're taking those same tools that they learned in Gateway, but applying it to learn how to tap into those deeper levels of their own awareness. And some people do call that getting more in touch with their guidance or higher self or total self, or in the program it's called the inner self helper, but a way of connecting with these other parts of ourself that perhaps have a larger overview, a bigger overview, or more information that goes beyond our five physical senses.
Well, there's also a lot of really fantastic experiences that people have during these programs. I suppose you could categorize them as psychic or transcendence. They're just really deeply moving experiences that are life-changing. Have you ever been able to apply a scientific measuring of these experiences beyond just the subjective reporting?
Like many phenomena like this, the only way to measure is through the painstaking collaboration of subjective reports. And when you get enough people describing the same situations, then you can say, from an outside perspective, you can say, well, this sounds true. Interestingly enough, there's lots of phenomena that go on that we know a whole lot about. For example, if you get 4 people testifying about an automobile accident, you'll get 4 generally different stories about whose fault it is and who was going too fast and how this happened. When you apply that to descriptions of encounters that people have, you see the same kinds of phenomena take place, that things are seen from different perspectives. But there's enough data that comes across that is similar, and enough data that is verifiable, that could not have been identified by independent means to say that there is something going on here. More importantly, what this is about is what it does for the individual in the program. And if you remember Darlene's explanation about going on believing something, is this thing called knowing that occurs through personal experience. And these people are able to come to that point of knowing. And they don't have to go out and convince other people. They, in a popular expression these days, is been there, done that. They know it.
And I'm sure that the knowing in and of itself plays a very important part on how they conduct the rest of their lives. I've heard similar types of stories of transformation that take place with people who've had NDEs or near-death experiences. Are these experiences in the program similar in nature to NDEs, the near-death experience?
I think Darlene can answer that best. There are characteristics that people have in ordinary life after they've had a near-death experience. The way in which they do life, the way in which they find certain things are more important to them than others were, and the mere fact that they no longer fear death. And I think if you re-ask this question of Darlene, you'd find that people that have gone through the program have a similar impact.
Okay, Darlene, I'm re-asking you.
Well, yes, I have to say that's true. And they can do it with much less trauma to their physical body, which is the fortunate part of that. But they certainly, when I was training the Lifeline program, one of the comments I heard most frequently, as Skip said, was, I no longer fear physical death.
Wow.
And in that knowing that that we do not die, our consciousness survives physical death, now I have a freedom to live is more fully. And that's a very common reaction to the Lifeline and Exploration 27 programs.
And I personally can't think of a more beautiful gift that somebody could give to themselves than actually coming to a program and relinquishing those fears that might hold us back from anything that we might want to experience on this personal journey of ours. I want to thank you both for being here. You've given me a lot of information, food for thought. I'm sure some of it's stuck in my head and others have gone over. I want to thank all of you for listening to the Gateway Radio program. Make sure that you tune in next week. We've got a fascinating program coming your way. The author of Mind Trek, Joseph McGonigal, who's a psychic spy for the military, and we're going to discuss the fascinating field of remote viewing. This is Mark Serto, the host of the Gateway Radio program, wishing you all peace on your personal journey. Good night, everyone.
Be certain to tune in next week to the Gateway Radio program and become informed on the latest information on the fascinating field of consciousness exploration and its practical applications. The opinions and the views of the guests are presented to inform you on various phenomena in our world and are not necessarily in accordance with the views of the producers or the Monroe Institute. For more information on the Gateway Radio program, write to Gateway Radio, care of the Monroe Institute, 62 Roberts Mountain Road, Faber, Virginia, 22938. This edition of the Gateway Radio program is the exclusive property of the Monroe Institute, copyright 1997, and is broadcast by permission. Any unauthorized broadcast or duplication of this program is prohibited by law. Thank you for listening.